For me, all of my tournament wins have come in single entry or 3-max contests. People play those way too conservatively. The higher the stakes you go, the more guilty people are of that. You don't have at least one uncomfortable click in your lineup, it's almost guaranteed it's not going to win.
1 week season.
Hey, welcome in OWS fam. Glad you are with us. This is the DFS Lab brought to you by 1 week season, and we are back in the lab getting you set for week one. Really, again, the purpose of this show is to build a Draftkings lineup and really use this as a vehicle to talk through strategy as we progress through the week. I'm your host, Cheeseman. I'll be with you here on the DFS Lab 4 days a week with a different guest each day of the week. Again, Monday, it'll be Showdown focused with Xandamir. Tuesday, Hilo. Thursday and Friday, StatATL and Pappy. And then on Wednesday, Mike Johnson will host that show with Maximus. The focus there will be Fanduel. And with that, he is StatATL, and he joins us now. He has been grinding out best ball this entire summer. I'm sure you've seen him on the OWS channels with Mike Johnson on the Wake and Snake, and it just in other venues as well. Stat, how you doing, man? And how's the grinding going with winding down best ball and getting into DFS?
Man, it has been a grind, as you have said. I feel like I've done 500, 600 drafts at this point, and just honestly looking forward to transitioning over to the DFS game. You know, we'll chat through kind of some of the differences between. I know you've done a couple of these already, some DFS labs already this week. So try not to repeat too much of the stuff, but appreciate you having me. It's great to work with you. I feel like you've edited my my articles for a couple of years now. It's great to kind of put a face with the name and do a podcast with you. Really looking forward to it this season.
Yeah, man. Same with you. I'm excited to work with you and hear your thoughts and your perspective. I know you're super sharp and have done well in a DFS. So just really excited to tackle this with you. What is, though, just out of curiosity, the biggest shift in the mindset for you when you've been grinding best ball for as long as you have, and suddenly it's switching over to the DFS mindset? How difficult is that, and what is the biggest shift?
I feel like there are probably two main proponents to that. So one, going through best ball season, we feel like we know a lot. I feel like I've got these preconceived notions now on all of the teams. And between myself and Hilo and Mike, we've had some in-depth conversations, bear cases and bull cases for all the offenses around. And I feel like I've got this idea of how I think every team is likely to play. And we're going to see how right or wrong I am come week one and week two. And, I may have to change my opinion on some teams. Some teams that I thought were going to be poor, may end up being the 2024 version of the Houston Texans, where we didn't think their offense was going to be great. And then here they show up and they're, they totally exceed expectations and you make a run in the playoffs. So, I think that's one way of looking at it. And then just kind of shifting the mindset to, I do almost exclusively drafters content and drafters contests, which is a cumulative scoring contest. So just kind of shifting away from looking at the season long perspective to, kind of what we named the site after, 1 week, looking at literally one game for each player and trying to do away with some biases of hey, well, these guys really aren't, they aren't pertinent for an 18 game, 17 game season, but for 1 week, these are guys that need to be considered.
Absolutely. Okay, well, let's jump into DraftKings here. And, we had kind of talked a little bit earlier today about what contest sizes we wanted to look at for this. On Tuesday, Hilo and I looked at kind of like a millionaire maker, the $100 millionaire maker style of contest with about 29,000. So you're kind of more thinking maybe a single entry, like that $12 or the $50 entry. Is that kind of your wheelhouse, or what kind of is your perspective in terms of contest sizes?
Yeah, so probably up until last season, I was exclusively a single entry 3-max guy. I would do 10 to 20 rosters a week, which I don't think actually is all that different than JM used to do. And kind of moved over to still doing that, but then also entering max entering the slant, which is the $9 150 max. It's the flattest payout. It's probably the best structure on all of DraftKings, in my opinion.
I do like
Um,
that one. Yeah.
I do want to. I'm going to give myself a shout out here a little bit. So I know one of the questions we get a lot in early season is around contest selection. So there is an article on the scroll. Again, I think you alluded to all content, including the scroll, is all free this week. So if you're
Yep.
listening and you're not a 1 week season subscriber just yet, obviously time to change that and come on and be part of the family. But um, I wrote an article this week just kind of talking about what I would do at different stakes. Like if I was playing 25 to $50 a week, if I was more of a mid stakes player, if I was more of a high stakes player, kind of what your goals are of hey, I'm trying to grind out a profit. Maybe these are more kind of the contests you want to play, or hey, I'm looking to do this for fun, but like obviously I still want to be able to maintain a bankroll, but like still have some upside to hit, some, I don't want to call it life changing money, but definitely, some nice vacations and things of that nature, vacation, money.
Definitely.
So for me, I've always had my most success. All of my tournament wins have come in either single entry or three max contests. Um, Generally, I find that people play those way too conservatively. The higher the stakes you go, the more guilty people are of that. Where it's like, hey, I'm building this one roster. Oh, it's $100, it's $200, it's $50. That's like my highest dollar entry of the week. And I'm gonna just play this conservative. Like I don't really want to take any risk. Like, this guy, he's kind of a fringe guy. Like that just doesn't feel safe. Like if
Yeah.
you don't have at least one uncomfortable click in your lineup, it's almost guaranteed it's not going to win. Um,
Well
like
said.
you have to you have to be willing to get uncomfortable a little bit with your roster. Like I'm not saying you got to go play, 8 or 9 guys that are going to be 3% owned, but like you probably need one that's just a lower owned guy that still has good upside, but like the field has uncertainty around it. There's a couple of those clicks in week one. And so I'm sure we'll kind of dive into that. But yeah, I mean, I would love for us to look at doing either a single entry, a three max, like a mid stakes one. I think in my article I laid out about 10 different contests that I think are really well structured in terms of like flat payout structure. So not 25 or 30 or 40% of the prize pool going to first place. Like those type of contests, if you're playing in them, um, generally like it's really hampering you from achieving your expected value. Like it's making it even harder. Like DFS is hard to begin with, but it's making it even harder for you to be a winning player.
Yeah, and it's those little edges, paying attention to those little things that can make that difference over time. So with that, let's step into the lineup building process where, like you said, kind of more of a single entry or 3 entry max mindset. And so let me just switch over here. All right, so here we are on DraftKings. As we kind of look at this and kind of set this up, who are you looking at in terms of offenses for week one? Obviously, you have Josh Allen at the top, but obviously you have some mid-range quarterbacks as well. So where do you want to start in terms of game environment and who you want to look at here?
Sure. So I think just kind of from the hop, and we didn't rehearse this, so I wouldn't have expected you to know this, but how I like to start each week, and I'll do kind of early game, like on Tuesdays, like I'll put out kind of a first look on all the teams. But what I like to do, and I haven't really done it yet for this week, I've looked at it kind of really high level. Just I'm still kind of entrenched in best ball with it, season starting tomorrow. But what I like to go is kind of game by game. And we're not going to do that on stream, but I like to go game by game, kind of like position by position. So like I'll start at whatever quarterback or running back, and I'll run through all the games, and I'll kind of note like, hey, here are the guys that I like, and that kind of helps me build kind of an initial player pool, and then I'll kind of even condense it and kind of shrink it. Like I'm a big proponent of like a tighter player pool. Obviously, you've got to expand that if you're going to run 200, 300, 400 lineups. If you're going to go 150 max in a contest, But in general, like I like to kind of start by kind of narrowing the pool. Um, and I think that gets easier as the season goes on, as we start to learn more and more about each team. Um, but yeah,
Definitely.
let's start at quarterback. That's totally fine. There's a couple of game environments that I really like. I mean, there's several that are not gonna fly under the radar, but I think that there are some that may not gain as much steam. You know, I really like the Commanders and Bucks game, but funny enough, I know from chatting with you and others in the Discord that unbeknownst to me, you and Hilo built out a team, a game stack of from that game a little bit. So we're going to certainly try to give the viewers a little different flavor. But I
Yes, but
really
that does
just
not
laugh.
mean that you shouldn't play the Commanders. I mean, I've heard it enough now that I like the Commanders, and I sounds like you do as well. But yeah, diversifying the portfolio a little bit here in this one.
Yeah. So you know, an offense. So I really love mobile quarterbacks. I've had all of my success with mobile quarterbacks. So obviously, the premier mobile quarterback is Josh Allen. You know, on this slate, I think what's interesting to consider on this slate, as you know, we have a lot of big names at all the positions, but we're also missing a lot of key names
Yeah,
at
that's a huge
every
factor.
position. Um, so kind of the of kind of the pay up options up top, you know, Josh Allen kind of stands alone, basically all the way down to about Kyler Murray, Anthony Richardson in terms of his mobility, kind of offering that dual threat. And so for me, it's always going to be really difficult. Doesn't really matter the matchup, but for me to choose a guy like CJ Stroud, who I love the Texans this year, but it's going to be so hard for me to opt for someone like CJ Stroud on the road, where $500 more I can get Josh Allen at home and kind of have that floor built in. So when you're building for like a single entry or a three max, um, and so what contest did you just select here, just kind of just for fun?
I just have the create a lineup, so it's actually not
Oh,
in a
okay.
contest right now. But assuming like a $50 single entry, uh, something like that.
Sure. Yeah. So when you get into those, a lot of those contests are going to be smaller than it sounded like you built for the $100 milli with Hilo. So
Correct.
like the 30,000 person field. So
Right.
generally, like the $50 single entry is like a 5 or 6,000 person field, if I'm remembering it correctly.
Yeah, sounds about
Um,
right. The main
and
one,
so
yeah.
generally with a contest of that size, you are trying to balance having some floor in a roster versus, you know, and having a lot of upside plays. Whereas like if we were building for the $5 milli maker, which is literally going to have just shy of 1 million people in it,
My
um,
goodness.
like you're literally playing against a small town. Like you're literally, I think the example I used in my article was like you're playing against the size of all of the population of New Orleans. Like that's literally what you're doing. So like in order, if you're putting content or entries into that contest, like you have to be conscious of the fact that I have to beat 1 million people. So I don't want to say you have to do wacky and crazy stuff, but like 8 guys, 9 guys that feel comfortable, that lineup is literally dead before you start. Like you can't play all the popular guys. You have to play for ceiling outcomes. You have to play for the what ifs, the one off. The you know, JM has a saying that I really have loved to adapt over the last 5 or 6 years. What do you win when you win? So like when you're right, what does that get you? Well, like if you play the most popular player at every position, let's just let's take a highly owned running back for example that's 30% owned, 40% owned. Like we see it almost every week. Maybe not week 1 because the pricing is so soft, but when you play those guys, they're going to hit pretty often. That's why they're so chalky. That's why they're so
Yep.
popular. But like that mindset of what do you win when you win? But when you're right about whoever this made up running back is, JT this week or whatever, if he's 40% owned, like he has a great game. That's great. Well, so does 40% of the field that has him. Like in that
Yep.
millionaire maker contest, like that's still 400,000 people. That's still you know, a small city's worth of population that
Yeah.
has him. Whereas if he just has a mediocre game, like he doesn't have to fail, but in order to win a contest like that, you kind of have to have the nuts. Like as the contest grows in size, the closer you have to get with your roster to the optimal roster. And so, it just doesn't make sense to build that way. Like you kind of have to look at it and say, okay, let me play a guy who's lesser owned. And when I'm right, like so fewer people are going to have that same direction, or at least this is how I look at daily fantasy. Um,
Absolutely. And the NFL is unpredictable, right? And so a lot of times people will get it set in their mind this is going to happen, but things that we don't expect to happen every single week. And so just yeah, like you're saying, playing that chalky approach, maybe you'll hit some cash lines, bubble some cash lines or get a nice 2x, but for most of us that's not why we're really playing putting in all this time.
mm-hmm. Yep, agreed. All right, so we're off on a little tangent there, but yeah, let's circle back to
No
quarterback.
worries.
And
Grinding it out.
so let's scroll down a little bit. I do like Anthony Richardson here in the Indy and Houston game. I think that has definitely the possibility of being a back and forth game. And I think maybe what we'll try to grab a piece or two from that game to kind of grab some of
Yeah.
the potential fantasy goodness of that game. You could certainly build around Anthony Richardson. I can promise you that I will in about 3 or 4 weeks when Josh Downs is back. Um, he's a guy that I just absolutely love this season, but dealing with that high ankle sprain from
Noted.
about probably I think 4 weeks ago in training camp. So likely not to be back for week one. And if he is, he's not going to be at 100%. So I'm going to wait on that game. I think that that's one that's going to be very popular. So I'm not going to be, fully committed to that game. The Houston's got a lot of exciting pieces at wide receiver. And I think just kind of, it's not really a question of if one of the wide receivers it's going to have a good game. It's kind of guessing of like which one of the three is because
Yeah.
Indy's secondary not great. And I think that has a game that has some shootout potential. But let's go down to the Tennessee Chicago game, and let's go with the first overall pick.
The man
And
from
go
USC
there. I think,
himself, Caleb Williams.
yeah, I
It
think
is. Is it the Hard Knocks influence? No.
no, I really like Caleb Williams. I really like Jaden Daniels. I think they have immense upside this season. Again, more of a best ball bias, but I really love Drake May this season. I think that as the season progresses, he's going to take that starting job from Brissett. They'll probably start out 2-5, and come week 7, week 8, he's got the job. And he's a guy that I just think has all the pieces. He'll start out being very underpriced. But I
Right.
really like these mobile quarterbacks. So
Yeah.
let's go
So
ahead and
Caleb
find a
Williams.
pair. So let's move over to wide receiver here.
Yeah. So are you looking at kind of like a receiver to stack in this case for Caleb Williams? Obviously, you got another rookie, Odunze. He's been definitely getting some hype so far this season, but obviously you got a really good receiving core in Chicago.
Yeah, between him and DJ Moore, you've got some strong Keenan Allen there too. You've got some strong options. DeAndre Swift catches passes. He's a guy that you could kind of throw into this game as well. So one of the things we'll shout out again, kind of for the viewers. So one of the big additions, I guess, from last season was the roster reviews. Those will be back this season again on Monday. So come Sunday night, Monday morning, I'll be reaching out in the Discord for our Inner Circle members to submit rosters. We'll kind of talk through what they look like, where maybe we would have done some things differently. But for those of you who have watched a lot of those in the past, like I'm a big proponent of correlation. It's just less things that you have to get right. And in a smaller field, I love it even more. It's you're making so many less bets that you have to get right in order to just drastically move up the leaderboard. So let's start with their alpha wide receiver. Let's go DJ Moore on this build.
Love it. Oh, Dunze, I did not realize, but he's only 4K on DraftKings, and just with his ability to go for explosive plays, he can pay that off in one play.
He absolutely can. There's a couple of offenses, the Bears being one of them, where I think that I'm taking a little bit more of a wait and see approach to kind of just see what the offense looks like. I know what I think it's going to look like. But I think in a smaller field contest, so we're going to say this is a 4,000 or 5,000 person build, $50 single entry. I don't think you have to get that cute off the hop. Just my opinion on it. But I think Rome Odunze is a great play in that 30,000 field that you built with Hilo on the Tuesday pod.
Absolutely, and I'm good with that. So
play there.
So we'll keep Caleb Williams, DJ Moore. As far as a bring back, are you looking for a bring back, or just going with just the Bears here, their offense, and not worrying about Tennessee?
Well, I think in order for Caleb Williams and DJ Moore to likely put up a score that is going to win a tournament, they're likely going to be pushed. Very first game for Caleb Williams. I think if they're blowing out Tennessee, people will say, well, if they're blowing them out, you don't want them because they've scored 28 points and then they're pulling out. Well, they still scored 28 points in the first half. So all those points probably went to Caleb Williams, or Swift or DJ Moore. So I think let's get two pieces from Tennessee and kind of do more of a game stack here. So let's grab Ridley.
Like that.
So Tennessee also has DeAndre Hopkins right about the same price. DeAndre Hopkins coming back from an injury that's kind of kept him out the last couple of weeks. Should be good to go. But, injuries can linger. I'd rather go with Calvin Ridley. He's looked really strong in the preseason. And we'll just kind of see how Hopkins looks through one game. So,
absolutely, yeah.
And then I think let's go to running back here. And in this same game, let's look at either Pollard or Spears. Let's see what the pricing is between the two.
All right, so Spears is 51, and then let's see. Did I scroll past? I probably
Pollard's going to be
more. Pollard 5,900.
Okay, yeah. So kind of the coaching staff, Brian Callahan over there has basically said, I view these guys as co-starters. So let's start and take a little bit of the discount. Let's go Spears.
Like it.
And kind of see what that looks like. So we're kind of setting up for. And I really love to do builds like this where take a quarterback, especially a mobile quarterback, because in order to kind of have more of that ceiling type game, he likely is going to need 40, 50 yards rushing and probably a rushing score, if not two, in order to kind of put up a had to have it type score.
Yes.
And so if he's getting a rushing touchdown, if he's also rushing for 50 yards, that's kind of directly hurting the other guys on his team. So generally, if I'm building with a mobile quarterback, one where I'm kind of banking on his legs for some points, I generally don't like to have more than one player, one pass catcher, one position player from his team.
100%, and that's a great reminder. Just because, when you're hoping for a rushing touchdown from that mobile quarterback, and that's going to take those points away from any potential stacking partners.
Yeah. So I think we're good with this game. I like this pair. We've got four guys kind of more in that mid-ish range of price. So we're still kind of looking at an average price in the mid fives. We've got a defense. That's obviously going to raise that.
Yeah, do you want to go
Um,
tight end or defense next, or do you kind of save those till the last typically in your process?
so in my process, I generally will, when I'm going position by position, I generally end up identifying, let's say, 5 or 6 defenses that I like. And I try to make it so that I pick a favorite, let's say 2 that are like more of the pay up. So like 3,400 and up. I then generally like to have 1 or 2 that's like 2,800 to 3,300, kind of in that mid defense. And I usually like to identify kind of one cheaper D in that 23, 24, 2,500, sometimes cheaper, depending on matchups and things like that. Um, but a lot of times when I'm building a lineup, I like to just kind of say, let's pick somebody in the mid range. So let's say that this week I like the Chargers as a potential option in that mid range. I generally like to throw in kind of someone around 3,000, give or take 100 or 2 on either side, as just
Absolutely.
kind of a placeholder. And as we
Yeah,
as we
that's what I was
build
going to
out
say.
this
You
roster,
literally pulled the word out of my mouth.
yeah. And the Chargers may end up staying in this lineup, but kind of depending on as we get to that last spot or two, if I need to, let's say, borrow 4 or 500 to get to some correlation that I really like as a play for this particular build, then maybe we kind of punt down on defense. If we end up at the lineup and I like the lineup, but I've got 600 left, maybe this is a spot where I pay up for defense. I also don't mind leaving a couple $100 on the table.
Yeah.
I don't know that I'd ever leave 2 or 3 thousand on a main slate, but I'd leave 3, 4, 500. I wouldn't think twice about leaving a few hundred.
Yep, I've done that before. Absolutely. So
Cool.
we got okay, throw the Chargers in. So we got a running back and then potentially another running back, but you want to look at another receiver here? Do you want to look at kind of a stud pay up option here? What direction you want to go next?
Yeah, so let's kind of look at some of the other game environments that we kind of like. Would you mind scrolling up a little so we just kind of see the games
Yep,
across
see
the
the
top?
games. So here's kind of the first you got that obviously the Houston Indy game. We mentioned that already, maybe trying to fit a piece in from there.
Yep, I
Um,
really like that Buffalo Arizona game too. I think that's got some potential as well. So let's look at the wide receivers from or just the flex players from just that game. So go flex and then click both of Arizona and Buffalo,
okay.
and we'll just look at that. And so, off the hop, we've got Marvin Harrison. He's rookie, first round pick. 7,200 bucks, man. That's a hard price to swallow week one with so
It
much
is.
uncertainty, and it feels like the possibility of him putting up a score that just crushes you for not having him, which would probably be a 5 or 6x score. So a 35 to 40 point score. That just feels like a sub 1% outcome. So I'm totally okay with moving past him. Um, Man, Khalil Shakir is just screaming at me at 5,100. Um, definitely a guy I am warm to um, this season. With the departures of both of Buffalo's number one and number
Is.
two wide receivers, you're getting who I think is going to be their wide receiver one at 5,100, playing with Josh Allen. Sign me up. And this could be one of those scenarios where we look at this in 2 or 3 weeks and we're just like, we were a little off on Khalil Shakir being the number one wide receiver. Maybe it ends up being Coleman. Maybe it ends up being Curtis Samuel. We don't know. Maybe it ends up being Kincaid, which I think is also just as likely. Um, but let's go with Khalil Shakir on this build. Um,
All right. That kind of gives us some flexibility here to the top end, especially still with tight end. So do you want to go there next and then see how much we got left over?
No, I want to. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Let's pair Shakir with someone from Arizona. I'm a big fan of correlation, so let
Love that.
let's make a bet on this game being higher scoring. Let's fill that second. Let's fill that second RB spot with James Conner,
Love it.
um, a guy who's getting a little older, 29 years old, I think now, but just doesn't have as much wear on the tires. A guy that I think is going to handle 70% of the snaps. And, I like this spot. Um, for Connor. So let's take a look at that. Um, I think one more thing that I always kind of preach about in the roster construction
Yeah,
builds
bring
when
it.
we do this review, and I know we're just kind of firing from the hip here, but let's move Shakir, who's in a 1 o'clock game, to the
Love
wide
him.
receiver spot. We want to make sure we're saving that flex spot for whoever is our latest playing player, and we know that's not going to be Shakir because he's literally playing in the first game. So this leaves us with about 6,200 left. We know we're likely spending less than that on tight end, probably. So yeah, let's clear it out. Let's look at tight end. Let's see. McBride, highest tight end on the board. Probably not going to go that way since I have Connor already. Um, you know, Maybe we look at Evan Engram here, and
Yeah.
look to build off that Jacksonville Miami game as our third option. I wouldn't hate that. What
Okay.
would
So
that
I'm gonna
leave us
throw.
with 7,000? Could we get to Waddle?
Let's see. He's there at
Yeah, he's
6,300.
6,300. Can we get to Tyreek? Tyreek's probably more than seven. He's got to be
He's
87. All
87.
right, not in the realistic realm here. So yeah, let's go Waddle on this build.
All right.
And so this gives us some more correlation. We've got 700 left. So maybe from here we go up from the Chargers, who are kind of our placeholder D, gets us up to 3,600. And man, I think
Yeah.
one of my two or three favorite options this week is the Vikings playing Daniel Jones, Mr. Turnover himself. Um, I think even though they're on the road, I feel like that's an option I don't mind. That probably keeps their ownership down a little bit. Um, I don't mind Seattle at home, the 12th man going against Nick's making his first career NFL
Debut.
start. I don't mind that either. Do you have a lean here, Tom?
I mean, I honestly would. I do prefer to try and target defenses at home. So it just kind of gut feel off the top of my head, I would go with Seattle, but diving deeper into the research, you kind of also got to look at what the tendencies are for these defensive coordinators, how aggressive these defenses are.
Mm-hmm.
So that, if I looked at it again and took a little more time, maybe that could lead me to Minnesota, but I would, if I had to pick right now, I'd probably go with Seattle. Again, also with the rookie quarterback on the road in his first game. I guess the one devil's advocate to that would be that Sean Payton will probably really try to ease Bo Nix in and not do anything too crazy. And so maybe Seattle just doesn't have a whole lot of opportunities to, generate turnovers, sacks, and it's more of a slow paced game. So, maybe I just convinced myself back to Minnesota.
Yeah, let's take a shot at the Vikings.
I like it.
Let's fill it out. I don't generally spend a ton of time on defense. I like to kind of pick the 5 or 6 that I like that I think have some good upside at different positions, different price points. And then for me, it's generally just who fits. Um,
Yep.
I think one of the defenses that I did like this week was, for example, is like the Bears. But I would never play the Bears in a game where I'm building a game stack around. Um,
Definitely.
it certainly could pay off. You could get a defensive touchdown from the Bears, but that just limits the upside that you're likely to see from Caleb Williams. So,
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, if it's like a 42-10 game and you got a defensive touchdown in there plus 5 offensive touchdowns, it could work. But still, optimally, it's typically not a good way to go.
sure. So, I
Okay.
think that I'm happy with how we ended up here. We've kind of got we've got 3 kind of main bets on this
Yes.
slate. We're betting on Tennessee and Chicago to kind of have a high scoring affair, and then we've got kind of mini stacks, correlation between Arizona and Buffalo, and then Jacksonville and Miami. All 3 are some of the higher game totals on the Vegas spreads. So Vegas seems to agree with kind of where we went there. And then we're just kind of betting on, turnovers, which is where you score points on defenses, touchdowns and sacks, fumbles, turnovers. And we're going to bet on that against Danny Dimes. So
I love it. Yeah, I mean, amazing. You know, outside of defense, you got 3 games represented, highly correlated, like you said. I mean, I like this build. I like this build, StatATL. Absolutely.
Awesome.
Very good, man. Well, anything else to add before we close this thing out?
I hope to see myself or you or an
Yes, in week
OWS
1.
subscriber and their avatar at the top of a leaderboard this week.
Yes, absolutely. And obviously week 1 is always like we already said, one of those weeks where we really don't know what's going to happen in week 1. But the thing I love about 1 week season is as the season progresses, I feel like we get stronger and stronger just in understanding how these teams like to play and how games are likely to go. And so even if week 1 doesn't go perfectly, I'm in it for the long haul and look at it as a marathon, not a sprint. So certainly excited. But StatATL, thanks so much for joining us here on the DFS Lab. And again, like you said already, head over to oneweekseason.com. All the content on there is free this week. You just have to sign up for a free account. And also, if you found this content valuable, make sure to give us a like, and hit that subscribe button. And once again, Stat, thanks for joining us, man. And again, best of luck this weekend.
Thank you, Cheeseman. Look forward to doing this again next week.
Sounds great. Talk to you then.